Our first guest speaker today is really a core member of our Samsung Electronics memory team. His name is Jim Elliott. He is the Vice President of Marketing at Samsung Semiconductor, based in San Jose. Jim has almost 20 years experience in the field and currently overlooks all marketing operations and communications of the business in the USA. So without any further ado, let me welcome Mr. Jim Elliott.
안녕하세요. 저는 Jim Elliott입니다. 반갑습니다. I'm just testing to make sure the translators are paying attention. Good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Jim Elliott. I'm the Vice President of Memory Marketing at Samsung Semiconductor, in charge of the North American memory marketing responsibility. So it is my great honor to be here today. I'm in charge of giving you a sort of a brief overview of the NAND Flash and SSD industry before we dive down into more of the product details. So first of all, I want to welcome everybody here to the event today. So show of hands, how many people this is their first time to Seoul? All right, so almost maybe a third of the people in here. So I'm sure you guys are going to have a wonderful time. And again, we're so excited that you are here with us today to share this wonderful agenda that we have prepared for you. So again, what I'd like to do is really start off by talking about our Samsung SSD leadership. But one thing I do have to mention in my intro, they said I had almost 20 years of experience. It makes me sound a little bit kind of like an old guy. So I think we might have to update my bio to say more than 10 years. I think that sounds a little bit more respectable. So with that, I'd like to give a brief overview of Samsung's SSD leadership position and also a little bit of an overview of NAND Flash, which is, again, the key storage device upon which this SSD product and product family is built upon. So the word I like to start out with is ubiquity or ubiquitous, meaning everywhere or all pervasive. And if you think about NAND Flash, it's truly everywhere. It's now an integral part of virtually every consumer device. I think it wasn't too long ago that even most of the camcorders were still based on hard drive technology. And now we sort of take the storage requirements or the storage needs that our CE or consumer electronics products have for granted. Cell phones, cameras, laptops, tablets, all these different connected devices are all made possible because of the underlying NAND Flash component technology. Recently, however, because of the fact that the component technology has gotten much more dense, we've been able to move it upstream into new products such as SSD, which is what we're here to talk to you about the majority of today. So let's look at the NAND Flash shipment forecast. And we spent a lot of time talking about bits and bytes, so what I'll try to do is give you a couple of analogies that really can ground it and give you a better idea of what's going on here. 2013, the industry will ship roughly 40 billion gigabytes. That's billion with a B, so it's, again, tremendous amounts of NAND. But what does that really mean? Well, if you think about it, if you do the math, that's roughly enough NAND produced this year. Or in 2015, if we extrapolate that over time, we're looking at about a 45% CAGR of NAND Flash output. Again, this is for the industry. But if we really want to put that into more understandable or digestible terms, let's think about that in terms of the U.S. population, slightly over 300 million people. In 2015, there will be enough NAND Flash to give every single person in the U.S. a 256 gigabyte SSD. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to give away an SSD to everyone in the U.S., but it just helps to quantify the data, the production data, to show that this is really a very, very solid curve moving forward, and that the output is substantial that the industry is driving towards to enable this new growth categories such as SSD. Let's look at the application trends. You know, it wasn't too long ago that NAND Flash was really driven by cards and USB flash drives. In fact, it was just a few years ago that those were the predominant end market applications that drove NAND Flash consumption. If we look at where we are today, you can see SSDs, tablets, and mobile phones in blue, representing the bottom three bars on this chart. 2013 already is over 60% for these three categories. And again, you can see that's a complete inversion from where we were just a few years ago. Now, if we look out in time, say 2015, 2016 timeframe, our expectation is that SSD will approach perhaps 30%, maybe mid-20s of the total NAND flash output of the industry. And considering this came from virtually nothing in 2006, 2007, it's pretty incredible to see the inroads that the application has made within the NAND flash market space. Let's talk about Samsung's leadership in the NAND market. You know, from a market share standpoint, Samsung has been the market leader in NAND for about 11 years running now. And currently, 2012, which is the latest full year market share that has been available, we had about 40% market share. Now, some of you may have read or seen or even attended the recent groundbreaking we had in Xi'an, China for the most recent NAND flash facility that we broke ground there last fall. So again, I think that serves as sort of a testament to our commitment to maintain that NAND flash leadership, both in technology, output, and production moving forward. Let's look at now at SSDs in the overall NAND market. And again, as I mentioned, it's really phenomenal if you think about that. This is a product category that didn't even exist, say, 6 or 7 years ago, and now this is having an impact on the NAND flash market. So about 4.4 billion gigabytes last year, which was about 16% of the NAND market. So let's look out to 2016, which again is just about 3 short years from now. Roughly 26% of the total NAND market will be consumed by SSD, perhaps say in the 33 billion gigabyte equivalent range. So that's about more than a 7x increase just in the last 4 years alone. So again, very, very significant, very, very steep growth that we're expecting in this space. Why SSDs? This is a little bit of a refresher course. So what I'd like to do, let's do a little market research here. So when I started talking about SSDs 5, 6 years ago, I'd ask for a show of hands how many people had an SSD, and I wouldn't get very many hands. This is a pretty technically sophisticated crowd. So let's see. Show of hands, how many people in the audience have an SSD? Okay, good. You guys are definitely on the early adopter side. So we're getting there. So I think you guys definitely understand the consumer expectations and the real value proposition of what drives an SSD. Thin and light. Again, flash is form factor agnostic. You can fit it at 2.5 to be reverse compatible with a hard drive. You can put it on a sort of a DIMM form factor. And SATA, much smaller, much lighter than a hard drive. It gives OEMs much more flexibility in terms of their industrial design. It takes some Z or some thickness out of the equation for their consumer electronics products. Instant on. I think this is one of the most tangible benefits of an SSD is once you've gone from a hard drive to an SSD-based PC, once you push that start button and see where that power button and seeing that screen flash up and you're ready to go within a couple of seconds, it's much different than the old days of booting up a hard drive-based PC, going to get a cup of coffee, coming back, and then finally you're ready to go. This is instant on. It's, again, the most tangible, I think, benefit that we see, or that consumers can see. And then low power. The variance range have seen estimates as high as an 80% reduction in power in many instances. So you couple this with the performance that you get, and then you think about the performance per unit of power consumed. Very compelling argument in favor of SSD. Robust. No moving parts. So if you drop it, doesn't matter if something's spinning, much more reliable than a hard drive because of the fact that there are no moving parts. So let's talk about performance for a second. Again, I think this is a review for a lot of people. I think everybody really understands this. But if you think about 90,000 IOPS in terms of what that means from a random read perspective for some of the latest and greatest SSDs that Samsung has to offer, basically take you about 200 hard drives, plus or minus, to yield that same amount of IOPS that you could get or generate with a single SSD. And what's interesting if you think about this is, in the PC space, you're talking about sort of a 1-to-1 replacement ratio. Think about this, though, in the context of a server or in a data center, where you're really after IOPS. You can now have a situation where you're replacing multiple hard drives with a single SSD. So you have much more robust total cost of ownership calculations as you get into this higher IOPS the SSD has to offer. Talk about weight for a second. SSDs are about 10 times lighter than a hard drive. Basically, if you were to weigh it, they're the smallest and lightest form factor is about 10 grams. That's about having the equivalent of 2 quarters in your pocket, right? Not a big deal. A hard drive, by contrast, is having 17 quarters in your pocket. So unless it's laundry day, most people I know don't want to be carrying 17 quarters around in their pockets. So again, think about the ID that this enables: lighter, more portability, more mobility for these leading edge consumer products. SSD will definitely enable that to be lighter as well. Now let's think about the data center. Why is SSD so important in the data center? Again, there's a lot of these social networking applications that are driving data center usage. Think about the Web 3.0 and 1 billion devices connected right now. In fact, or billions of devices. This year, there are actually more connected devices than there are people on the planet. This presents a large challenge, obviously, for data center operators to try to connect all these devices. So let's look at some of the data here. So Facebook, 1 billion users worldwide, right? More than 10 billion page views per day. So this, we've already proven this is a pretty technically sophisticated crowd. Let's do some more market research. How many people in the audience have a Facebook account? That's pretty good. Let's take it up a notch. How many people have logged on to Facebook already today? All right. All right, one more. Is anybody on Facebook right now? All right, see, there you go. Therein lies my point. So here's an interesting demographic I'd like to impart you with. Among the 18 to 34-year-old demographic, almost 1/3 will check Facebook before they get out of bed in the morning. So think about that. Right? Instagram just announced they're supporting video. Billions of devices sharing pictures, sharing videos. YouTube, there are 4 billion videos watched every day on YouTube. Phenomenal amounts of data. What is a data center operator to do to optimize their IOPS per gigabyte and IOPS per watt? Utilizing SSD. That's where you can store that hot data that can have multiple access points to really generate that TCO that you need to really make that best physical implementation of your IT equipment is utilizing SSD technology. Shipment forecast. What's interesting is the way that the SSD growth has been shaping up over the last couple of years. It's a pretty phenomenal growth curve. In fact, each year the industry is on track to ship roughly the equivalent of the previous 2 years combined. Now this chart here is in gigabytes. So again, this year we're showing maybe 7 to 8 billion gigabyte equivalents. You can see there's a nice mix of PC as well as blue, as well as server and storage in green. If you want to quantify this in terms of units, most market analysts have that number for this year pegged between 60 and 70 million SSD units. So again, I would sort of use the term critical mass to sum up where the industry is in terms of SSD adoption at this point. Let's look at our Samsung's SSD leadership, or our position in the worldwide marketplace now. In fact, this year, 6 out of 10 PCs shipped will have Samsung SSD inside. That means if everyone in the room took their PC, turned it upside down, got a screwdriver out, opened them up, about 60% of them would have the Samsung SSD in it, assuming you bought it in 2013. Again, this is an industry we've been or an application we've been very focused on, and we feel that we have the wherewithal and the drive and the commitment to continue this type of leadership moving forward. So the question now is, what has Samsung done for SSDs? So the way I want to answer this question is by going back in time a little bit, giving you a little bit of a historical context, talk about where we came from before we start talking about where we're going. 2006, it really wasn't that long ago, right? About 6-7 years ago. Brought SSDs to the mainstream market. We had the world's first SSD-based PC was powered by Samsung. Does anyone want to guess the density of these two products here that you see? The density of SSD? One was a 32 gigabyte, and one was a 48 gigabyte. Now, I've been in marketing for a long time. Let me tell you, that's a tough sell, right? Trying to get 32 and 48 gigabyte out there. Compared to the density points we have today, it's almost a no-brainer. So again, just think about where we were 6-7 years ago versus the capacity points that are available today. It's pretty incredible if you're thinking about it just in that 6-7 year time gap. 2008, there was really a fundamental shift in 2008 when we went from an SLC-based SSD to MLC. So that single level cell now going to two level cell, MLC, multi-level cell, right? And what that does, it allowed us to lower our cost by about 40%. So think about the elasticity then that kicks in. We can go up in density, we can go down in price without sacrificing performance, without sacrificing reliability, endurance, or quality. So this was a really major development in 2008 once we were able to shift the consumer segment over to MLC-based SSD technology. 2010, I wanted to look at the, let's look at the attach rates. We cracked about 2.5% attach rate in the PC space in 2010. Last year, approaching 7%. So perhaps we can get to double digits in 2013. But in 2010, Samsung had about print position or on the bill of materials with 8 of the top 10 PC OEMs shipping Samsung SSDs inside. And I think this is a real testament to the quality and to the reliability of the product, because PC OEMs, again, they're concerned about their brand, they're concerned about their image, these multi-billion-dollar marketing campaigns that they have. So they're very, very picky. They have very stringent quality levels, and they really only want to play with the best from a supplier standpoint, because again, that data is so critical when you're talking about somebody's videos, somebody's photos, basically their life story on a PC nowadays. 2012, last year, another significant shift. Remember, we went from SLC to MLC. Last year, we offered the first 3-bit MLC. What that allowed us to do, again, it'll add about 30% more gigabytes to the PC. So this now allows us to play on more of a level playing field with the hard drive industry from a capacity standpoint. So really, if you think about it, we're firing on all cylinders. We're competing on every single front against the hard drive. And 3-bit per cell will allow us to hit those capacity points, again, that allow us to get those higher end SKUs where the consumers demand higher gigabyte capacity. We're going to be able to get there very conveniently or very easily with 3-bit per cell technology. So if you really think about it, the history of Samsung SSD is, in a sense, the history of SSD, and we are moving that history forward. So let's talk a little bit now about our vision for the future and what we have coming down the pipeline. Client SSD evolution. So in 2013, PCIe SSD became available for extreme performance seekers. So think about the performance you already have with a standard SATA interface SSD. And then think about PCIe, sequential read performance, about 2.5 times faster. So again, we're really pushing the envelope in terms of reaching a brand new category of product and end users when we're talking about PCIe and really pushing the envelope for that performance. Server SSD and data center. Again, and we talked a little bit about this earlier with social networking. You know, servers and data centers, there's about 3 million data centers worldwide. In fact, in the U.S., data center electricity consumption is now 2% of the overall U.S. electricity consumption. Some data centers now use the same, some of the larger ones can use the same amount of electricity as a medium-sized town. So obviously, this is a huge concern for data center operators. And I read one statistic that said that about every 2 days, there are 5 exabytes of data created since 2000. So this is a phenomenal amount of data. That's more data every 2 days that was created from the dawn of civilization up until about 2000, with that in perspective. So what are we doing with all that data, right? All those videos, all those photos, all those billions of connected devices. You really need an SSD in a data center to be able to manage that efficiently and quickly with less power. So again, you're talking about much better IOPS, much lower power. So your IOPS per watt, much, much better from a total cost of ownership perspective, which is why we expect to make so many inroads in the server and data center space. And again, as you can see, we're expecting 2 times more traffic from 2012 to 2015 within the server and data center space from a data traffic standpoint. So SSD, best dollar per IOPS, best IOPS per watt, and also best dollars per total bytes written. It's really a no-brainer in this space. So the question really is now, what makes Samsung SSD different? right? Aren't all SSDs the same? Well, not really. First of all, again, as I mentioned, Samsung is the world's largest supplier of NAND Flash. We're committed to maintaining this leadership position we have, the investments that we make. We have the financial wherewithal and technological capabilities to do so. We only use the best flash. We take the cream of the crop. We look at the best NAND chip selection from a yield standpoint. We take that SSD grade NAND, which is at the very far end of that production grade, very far end of that bell curve. And what we find is that gives us 20 times fewer bad blocks. Much less for us to have to manage from a reliability, from a quality perspective. So once you have that solid foundation, you can build a much, much better product at the system level. Speaking of the system level, let's talk about this end-to-end integration. I would actually rather call this vertical integration. That's the key. That's the real secret sauce. Samsung is vertically integrated. We have the NAND, we have the DRAM, we have the controller, and we have the firmware. So it's a very symbiotic relationship between these four different devices. This allows us to get higher quality. This allows us to tune everything in cycle in terms of a dire vision or a new controller. We can pair that with our NAND flash technology. And it also allows us to troubleshoot quite effectively. There's no finger pointing about who's responsible for what. We own the total solution. And again, that vertical integration is key, not only for QA and troubleshooting, but also for collaboration with OEM partners and ecosystem partners in the future. So again, thinking about that advanced flash technology, again, that's sort of the building block, is what we're doing at the silicon level as we continue to shrink that process. But there's so much more that goes into that in terms of the advanced signal processing, right? This is your ECC, your high endurance features, the advanced FTL or flash transition layer. This is where you have your wear leveling as well as your bad block management, things of that nature, and then your flash aware host system. All of these is where we put this together, including the controller and the firmware, allows us to have a much better product, much better quality, more reliability, and more endurance than any other product on the market today. So the question now is, what makes the best SSD? So what we can do is we have with what we call our flexible firmware management, we can optimize the SSD depending on the usage requirement that it's going into. For PC, it's all about that burst or peak performance, right? For that enthusiast, for that gamer, they have to have that best performance available. We can optimize firmware to get them exactly where they need to be, and tweak the performance of that SSD to make that system hum. And on the data center side or server side, it's all about predictability and stability. They want predictable performance, especially when it comes to latency. So again, we can take that same SSD, optimize that firmware, and then make that drive perfectly suitable for a server or a data center installation. And as I start to close my presentation, I really want to sort of reiterate the fact that, Samsung, if you look at where we are, where we've been, and where we're going, we have an extremely broad product portfolio. On the client side, everything from the mainstream, which is the 3-bit per cell product offerings, which is the SATA interface. We have the SATA Premium, which is a 2-bit per cell offering, and then also PCIe going into that. So every conceivable form factor, every conceivable interface. And on the enterprise side, SATA, we've had for many years, moving into SAS, and then looking at PCIe in the future as well. So again, breadth of product, breadth of form factor, and then our vision for the future is to maintain our leadership in all of these key market segments and applications. So again, Samsung's SSD leadership brings you the highest quality at the product level. We really consider this to be a system, right? This is a system solution. It's got brains, it's got the controller, it's got software inherent in it as well, and the NAND flash component. Highest quality and most advanced flash, that full end-to-end integration. Again, because we are vertically integrated, that gives us a huge advantage in so many different areas. And then finally, our extensive product portfolio, which some of my colleagues are going to be here to talk to you about in further detail today. So with that, I'd like to say 감사합니다. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. So what Jim was talking about in summary was he really gave a good view of the overall NAND market and also Samsung SSDs, where we came from and where we are. But what about the future? A year from now, 2 years, 3 years? And I think to tell that story, we're going to invite Mr. Kun-Soo Jo, who is our senior engineer at Samsung Electronics. He is in charge of future SSD product planning. And his experience expands from system software, DRAM, to flash engineering. And is also Samsung's representative on a number of industry groups such as JDAC and NVM Express. So please welcome Mr. Kun-Soo Jo.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Kun-Soo Jo, and like you said, I'm responsible for, I'm not in charge of, but I'm responsible for future SSD product planning, and currently it's storage standardizations as well. I'm today very excited for me to being able to share Samsung's latest movement toward our next generation storage technologies. And it's going to be a little bit of torture for you, for some of you, and it's going to be very good information for some of you. Hopefully, torture is a little less than the information. And also, if you have any questions, there will be our specialists at the end of whole sessions. You can hold your questions until that time, and our specialists will be ready for your any questions. Redesigning flash storage technology. Breakthrough with the SSD. What it is that this is usual primer every time whenever anybody is expressing SSDs or describing what is SSDs and what is that all for. Basically, one of the key reasons is that process has been improved around 20,000 times over the last 13 years, whereas SSD is only improved around 12 times for that period of time. For this huge performance gap, user experience has gotten really worse, and there were some sort of tools that need to mitigate these gaps. So basically, flash memory storage has been really successful in terms of bridging this performance gap. If you look at the hard disk performance, because of the characteristics of hard disk drive, which is latency around 1 or 5 millisecond order, and if it's compared to NAND flash memory or any new NVM, it is, let's say, for read latency, it takes about 50 microseconds or to 100 microsecond order. So there's huge performance, 2 orders of magnitude of difference. So SSD has been really successful in terms of meeting and bridging these gaps. What are the key aspects of SSD to be able to be successful for the last 7 or 10 years? Is performance. Of course, it's better performance because we are using silicon and NAND flash memory rather than platter or desktop disk. And it's better reliability, meaning that it has less failure rate. And silent operation. There's no mechanical moving part in the SSD. Power consumption. It has consumes less power, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is consuming, it necessarily means that it consumes less power. It could still be consuming the same amount of power, but what it actually means is that the power efficiency is very good. So meaning that with a given power envelope, SSD consumes less power by providing higher performance. Responsiveness, of course. And form factor. Form factor has been one of the key aspects as we are moving toward mobile and as we're moving toward power efficient server systems. If you look at the mobile devices, such as ultrabooks and tablets and smartphones, no one is using hard disk drive any longer. Even for servers, data centers, the power itself is directly translated into their cost of ownership. So power is very important thing, and form factor is also very important thing as well. So like Jim has told you earlier, we have different lineups for each different applications. PC application, we had SATA interface-based SSDs for the last few years, and SAS SSDs for the enterprise SSDs with dual-port high availability capabilities. But it was actually following the previous hard disk drive technologies. But as we're moving on with NAND Flash memory-based storages, industry leaders have formed many different numbers of standardization body to be able to maximize the NAND Flash storage performance. So what I'm going to explain later in these pages on this session is regarding the technologies that is implemented in our next generation SSDs, which is going to be PCIe, one key catchphrase, and also NVM Express. First key point is PCIe. So I think everyone knows what PCIe is here. PCIe has been the system local bus, mostly for many of the users think it as a graphic card interface, where that requires higher bandwidth and shorter latency for them to be able to process so much huge chunk of data transaction. With SATA interface, there was PCI interface together, but the purpose of these two interfaces has been different for a long time. And one of the key reasons SSD have had to use SATA interface because customers and our end users wanted to drop and replace with current storage, which is actually SATA hard disk drive. So they didn't necessarily have to change softwares, or they didn't necessarily have to redesign hardware for them to be able to use PCIe interface-based SSDs. But if you look at the architecture of SSD, it is composed of dozens of numbers of NAND flash memory inside. With one NAND flash memory, the total DDR is providing 400 megabytes per second transfer rate with just one single NAND flash memory. And we have dozens of it. And in the typical client SSDs applications, we usually have around 8 channels. The channel mean is that what the channel means is that the bus where they can transfer and receive data from controller to the NAND flash memory. And in the usual applications, we have around 8 numbers of channels. And if you multiply by 4 megabytes per second speed with 8 channels, it will be 3.2 gigabytes per second speed potential performance inside of SSD, which is bottlenecked by SATA interface. So we've had to think about it. So do we have to move on with SATA SSD, or do we really need to have to differentiate from this point? SATA SSD has been really good, but we really need to take some time to transition to the other way. But at this point, we've decided to move on to PCIe. For the products that's coming this year, and next year, and year after next year, a lot of SS vendors, including Samsung, will be releasing their latest SSDs with PCIe interface implemented in there. So performance-wise, SATA is bottlenecked. The latest SATA technology is supporting only up to 600 megabytes per second. And the latest PCIe interface is providing 1 gigabyte per second speed. So we don't need to use SATA any longer. So I'll give you a little bit more in detail about these transitions and what is the benefits and what we have achieved in Samsung. So basically, our Samsung's view in terms of next generation interface for SSD is PCI interface, and we think it's going to be storage technology for the next 10 years. So I'll just I want to point out 4 main key aspects of PCI which is advantageous over SATA or any other interfaces. It has broader bandwidth. It has a higher scalability. It has reduced latency and improved energy efficiency. What it means is broader bandwidth, first of all, and most importantly, SATA SSD speed from 600 megabytes per second limitation, we are moving to PCI SSD 100 megabytes per second. So we are gaining approximately 40% of performance advantage. Reduce the latency. For PCIe to be able to communicate with SATA SSD, there has to be some sort of adapter. In a technical term, HBA, the host bus adapter. So this adapter is responsible for translating PCI protocol into SATA interface protocol. So one of the key reasons we had these bridges or this adapter before, we used to have different local high-speed buses, such as FESA, ISA, EISA, or MCA, all those kind of things. But all of those system bus technology has consolidated into PCIe now. If you look at PCs or servers, so any systems, PCIe interface is the baseline of their architecture. So there's no reason, especially for SSD, not to use PCIe interface so that we can directly communicate with processors. Adapter that has been worked as the toll gate in an expressway, each one of the car has to pay their toll fee. And each of the command had to wait until they can be allocated into the SATA interface. So we were significantly reduced the latency around 10 microsecond level of order of amount. Higher scalability. Technical perspective and standard perspective, SATA interface is only available to be support one lane, meaning that even if you want to add 600 megabyte interface into 2 or 4, it's prohibited by the specifications. So it wasn't needed first of all because nobody was expecting disk performance going anywhere over 300 megabytes per second. Even SATA Gen 3, which I just talked about, 600 megabytes per second speed, it was actually proposed from SSD suppliers because we needed a higher performance. But if you look at the disk performance, it is still saturated around 300 megabytes per second performance. So it was already good enough for this drive for this drive. SRI was already good enough for this drive. But look at the PCIe. It is designed from the ground up for system local bus. It has scalability to increase its bandwidth from 1 lane to 2 lane. Or you can even increase it to 4 lanes. Or even you can increase to 8 lanes. How about 16? Yes, it can also increase up to 16 lanes. Depending on the user's target application, target demand and requirement, you can configure it as number of PCI lanes that you want it. But of course, there will be some limitations in terms of connector. If you want to have a 16 connectors inside, you would have to have more number of pins inside. But what I'm trying to say is that in a specification, in a standard perspective, it is natively supported. But if you look at the 560 interface PCIe, as I said, 100,000 megabytes per second for 1 lane, it will be 16,000 megabytes per second. For today's most usual SSDs, let's say, like I told you an example earlier, SSD usually have around 8 channels. If you multiply by 400 megabytes, like I said, it will be 3.2 gigabytes per second. So it will be too much, even for current SSDs, unless we improve further for our NAND Flash version, internal architecture, everything like that. So pretty much the sweet spot, I guess, is around 4 lanes or 8 lanes. 4 lanes becoming 4 gigabytes per second, 8 lanes becoming 8 gigabytes per second bandwidth. Improved energy efficiency. PCI SSD provides higher performance. The controller inside is actually consuming a little bit more power than any other storage controllers because we are processing a lot of data. But within the given power budget, it is providing twice more performance, or 3 times or 4 times more performance. So, like ultrabooks, so mobile devices, example, like I said earlier, and data centers, it is key factors and key demands we are getting from our customers, getting from feedback that we are getting from our end customers. For SATA SSD, you have to stop in certain points when the batteries ran out. But if you use PCI SSD, with a given amount of processes, given amount of data you have to write or read, you can use your ultrabook, or you can use your PCs a little bit longer, and it's guaranteeing the longer battery life, and it's good for next generation applications. And form factors. Most people, when I say PCIe, they say, no, it's not an interface for storage. I don't like to use bulky PCI card in my laptop. I can't even do that. Right? I don't want to use that expensive, look like complicated device into my PCs. Not any longer. Or if you look at the SATA, we had to have 2.5-inch SATA SSD because you just wanted to drop and replace with existing hard disk drive. And there was also 1.5-inch hard disk drive, so we developed 1.5-inch hard disk a long time ago. And one of the innovative form factor was mSATA. mSATA was actually only for, we won't see any hard disk drive with that form factor. So mSATA was designed only for SSD, but truth is, it wasn't designed for SSD at the first time. If you remember I think it's still in your pieces. If you remember, it is PCIe mini card form factor that's used for Wi-Fi functions inside of a laptop. When we're trying to find out any small form factors, instead of redesigning, which is taking about three years of time for standardization and 3 years of time of adaptation. So we try to find out a way, and we just decided to use PCI mini card. We just changed the interface from PCIe to SATA. But in a form factor, space efficiency perspective, it wasn't so good. So again, in this leader's form, in the SATA I/O standardization workgroup, we've proposed M.2 form factor, which is most optimized in a space perspective and the performance perspective. In M.2, in that little form factor, we are able to provide 4 lanes of PCIe interface. So this interconnect is translated into 4 gigabytes per second with that small form factor. This form factor is provided with height of 40 millimeters and 60 millimeters and 80 millimeters and 110 millimeters, depending on the capacities that you like to put in your SSD. How about the enterprise? How about the server side? Instead of using graphic card like PCI SSD, even though they liked PCI interface with higher and better performance and better reliability and energy efficiency, all that thing, but they didn't want to use PCI card because they didn't want to ship the power off and pull the drawer out and replace the card if there's any failure. And that whole hassle now is gone. We formed SSD form factor standard work group. This group was from the ground up only targeted for server applications that enabling us to be able to change the device in the front side without turning off the server, without all those hassles. And if there's any problems with the SSD, you can just go and hot swap it. You can just plug the device and pull it out and replace the new ones. So it's becoming very simple like that. So it's 2.5 inch base, and this connector, and this type of servers is compatible with the SATA and SAS interface as well. So we are supporting backward compatibility as well as PCI interface. And this one also supports 4 lanes of PCI interface, providing 4 gigabytes per second performance, sequential performance. So we've released our first PCI SSD, and it was for ultra mobile PCs and tablets. This is press release that has been done actually last month. From last year's Global Summit, I've told around our PCI momentum, our movement into it, and we have been successful in terms of releasing our first PCI SSD for ultra. So it's not a first PCI SSD. There's PCI SSD suppliers, but it's for ultra PCIe, and it's not like that bulky, expensive, those types. It's clearly the one that is replacing current SATA interface. Performance, 1.400 megabytes per second, which is able to transfer high definition 5 gigabyte high definition movie, 10 of high definition movie within 36 seconds, which is 7 times better performance from latest hard disk drive, and 2.5 times better performance with currently what we are having, the SATA SSDs. So we had a very good feedback from you, our valued guests. We really appreciate that. We've been really successful, and it was very encouraging to us. We were really worried about it the first time because opening a new market, but the feedback was very good, and from our end customers were asking a lot of questions regarding it and when it's going to be launched in channel and all that kind of thing. So we think it was very good. It was really successful in terms of feedback that we are getting from our customers. So I've already talked about PCIe, but nothing changes in there. Have we done enough? Is there anything else? One of the key things that we had to bear is we had to use the software stack that has been used in SATA interface, which is called AHCI. So AHCI was introduced in 2003, and it is coming up with SATA Gen 3 interface, and it provides all those command queuings and NQs and so forth. But that protocol or that software stack is not helping SSD providing the best performance out of it, because they didn't care about the characteristics of NAND flash memory. Hard disk drive platters, they had long latency, 6 times rotation latency. So a few microseconds processing the software commands, it doesn't matter to them. I'd like to introduce our next technology, which is NVM Express. NVM Express stands for Non-Volatile Memory Express. Non-volatile memory, of course, means flash memory, but it also includes latest new non-volatile technologies such as phase change memory, map register, PRAM, RRAM, SATA, all those kind of things. So what it's supposed to mean is that it reduces the latency as little as possible by redesigning everything from software level to hardware register level. Express means, of course, PCI Express. So NVM Express is NAND Flash memory optimized super fast PCIe protocol. Brief introduction of NVM Express. I'm actually participating in this work group as one of the promoter members. So we have at this time 80 companies from across the industry, and it is directed by 13 promoter companies, including Samsung. It was first and ever organization that is designing a standard for NVM or flash memory. The specification has been released in 2011 March, and 1.1 specification has been released last year October. Here's the page that I'm really worrying about. I'll probably have to torture you a little bit about the NVMe technology in comparison with SATA technology, which is also used in PCIe, and the PCIe that we released in the last month. So currently the PCI SSD is only using either previous HCI protocol or its technology or its software stacks, or it has its own proprietary protocols with their own drivers and software stacks and all that thing. Key differentiators are uncacheable register reads and MSIX and interrupt steering and parallelism and multiple threads and maximum queue depth and efficiency of 4K byte commands, and lastly, and the most important, the latency. So uncacheable register read is, in an HCI protocol, you had to have 4 uncacheable register read. Each one of uncacheable register read takes around 2,000 CPU cycles, and for 4 commands, it have to be 8,000 CPU cycles, which is becoming around 2 to 3 microseconds, depending on the frequency of processor that is being tested. Whereas in NVMe, there is no uncacheable register read. And interrupt steering, instead of one core out of multiple cores is being responsible for taking care of interrupts, you can allocate each core to process interrupts, what they're responsible for. So instead of one core is moving the information, the interrupts back and forth with other cores, each core can take care of its own interrupt themselves. So it's actually minimizing a lot of latency in there. And parallelism and multiple threads, the same aspect. And maximum queue depth. In an HCI, it is only allowed, one queue is only allowed in the HCI. That one queue is able to buffer only up to 32 commands. Whereas in NVMe, it has 64,000 queues, and each queue has 64,000 command buffering. In a hard disk drive world, 32 command queue was good enough because we had only one head, and with the number of queues, if you have number of commands, you can reorder them as the way that the head moves most efficiently. If there's no command queue or no out of order operation, you would have to access the first command first, regardless of the next command is right next to the head. So pretty much around 32 buffer or 32 queue out of order operation, they can reorder the sequence of read and write and access of the point in the disk or platter. But in the NAND Flash and SSD world, each NAND Flash is becoming a disk and with head on it. Each number of NAND Flash can read and write concurrently, and this is architecture of SSD. In an SSD, we have 32 NAND dies, or 64, or dozens of hundreds of slides with a higher capacity. So if you have a multiple number of commands, you can do out of order the sequence. Any NAND flash available, you can just allocate the command into that NAND flash. You can read and write, and you don't have to wait for any other commands. You don't have to wait because we have a limited number of commands that you can make it efficient. And efficiency for the 4K commands, of course, it is proposed because flash memory's data transfer size is based off page size, which is 4K bytes instead of 512 or 512 with the hard disk world. In the hard disk world, the smaller sector size is 512, but in the SSD, it was in 4K bytes or 16K byte or somewhere around that. So it is optimized on that data chunk size that is most efficient to transfer data. And lastly, the latency. Instead of using HCI software stack that is taking a whole lot of time, rather than NVM Express, it got rid of all overhead and it's deleted or got rid of all backward compatible commands and so forth. It only required 6 commands to be able to read and write and access the SSDs. Instead, in HCI or SCSI, you have 100 commands and you have to understand and process it. With our measurement internally in Samsung, from SATA SSD with HCI protocol, the latency is around 12 microseconds. If we just change that into PCI interface, without changing any other protocols or technologies in there, we've been able to achieve 7 microseconds. And once you change the protocol into HCI, to NVM Express, it is reduced all the way down to 1 microsecond. So we are getting around 6 or like this 70% or 80% advantage over previous technologies. So, in short, with all these new technologies and all PCIEs, HCI, PCI SSDs, even if it's running with the same bandwidth, same frequency, NVM Express is providing a straightforward expressway where the HCI is curved. It's a curved road where you have to move back and forth to be able to process any transactions. By having PCI SSD, we were able to achieve 4 times better performance with 4 lanes of PCIe latest gen protocol. And with the transition from HCI to NVM Express, we're going to be able to achieve 4 times better random performance. This PCI technologies is going to be next generation storage technology, which is going to be used in ultrabooks. And good example is M.2 form factor, like I told you earlier in the previous page. And also in client desktop markets. So we have SATA Express form factor, which is 2.5 inch, and it is provided by 2 PCI lanes. So the loop itself is exactly the same as SATA SSD, and it is also compatible with SATA ports in platforms in the coming future, because interface between SATA Gen 3 and interface PCI Gen 3, they're actually being merged in the next generation Intel chipsets. So you'll be able to see a platform that can be used with SATA interface-based SSDs and PCI-based SSD really. So there is certain technology implemented it, but I don't think I need to necessarily explain everything about it, but it will be coming soon. And for PCI card, as it has been there, it will be there pretty much. And for SFX39, for server and data center and enterprise applications, this 2.5 inch is going to be available widely in the industry as it's shifting from SAS SSD or SATA SSD with higher performance. So I was really excited to be able to share this information. So last month we've shared our first PCI SSD, and coming to the end of this year, we're starting to share our next generation PCI SSDs with NVM Express technology with different form factors. Samsung is leading SSD technology, and we are committed to introduce the earliest products than any other suppliers. Thank you very much.